2025 was another great year for movies. While not quite as many new entries into the canon as there have been in past years, there was still an abundance of work that provided a little something for everyone. Enough at least that I have a handful of honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list, but are worth mentioning nonetheless. These films are Sorry Baby, directed by Ava Victor, Surat, directed by Oliver Lax, Magellan, directed by Lav Diaz, Mirrors Number 3, directed by Christian Petzold, and The Shrouds, directed by David Cronenberg. Now for my top 15. Acclaimed Iranian filmmaker Jafar Panahi has spent the past decade or more in and out of prison and under house arrest for making movies critical of his country's regime. And with his Palme d'Or winning It Was Just an Accident, he pours all of his pent-up anger, frustration, and exhaustion into this new film, for a work that entirely hinges on a thorny moral dilemma, that if you came into contact with the very man who was yours and countless others' captor and torturer, what would you do to them? This is the predicament thrust onto 4 Iranians fresh out of doing time for protesting against this oppressive system they live under, who then manage to come across and abduct the man responsible for the torture, rape, and murder they suffered and or observed while imprisoned. This latest work from Panahi is far more theatrical and accessible than you might be expecting from him. He's paring down much of the formal experimentation that has defined his previous works, ditching the autofiction style he's honed for so long, from This Is Not a Film to No Bears, to make a stripped-back yet tense thriller. No longer is he choosing to conceal his personal and political expression under multiple layers. He's now presenting his anger and despair, his humor and empathy entirely unvarnished, for what is his most explicit and shockingly deeply funny assault on his home country. It Was Just an Accident is simultaneously a harrowing and liberating piece of cinema, with Panahi laying out his many questions of justice, corruption, culpability, and forgiveness, all for us to sit with, without acting as if there are any easy answers to give us. It's a film as a plea for and a warning from both its characters and the very man sitting behind the camera. It feels like a miracle that Ryan Coogler's Sinners even exists. A $90 million plus period horror musical from a major studio set in a hyper-stylized vision of the Jim Crow American South just doesn't sound like a movie that would have been made at this scale and within the current climate of the Hollywood studio system. But Warner Brothers, as they did with another big-budget movie from an auteur this year, took a major swing, and it paid off massively. Sinners completely immerses the audience in the pure sensuality and musicality of its filmmaking. Those overwhelming IMAX frames pulling you into a frenzy of endless fields, expansive blue skies, and vampiric violence. Coogler manages to find such an intoxicating blend of the carnal, the criminal, and the mystic that all come to a head in the film's centerpiece sequence, an elaborately staged, one-take musical number in which the past, present, and future coexist on the dance floor of a juke joint. Coogler is taking some of the tricks he learned within the Marvel and franchise machine, and how he approaches very familiar material through such a refreshing, culturally specific lens. Here he's pulling from the blues, Black Christianity, the oral traditions of enslaved African Americans, and the culture of 30s Jim Crow South. These things that help build a world, and make something that could feel tired into something that feels entirely fresh, because of the variety of influences Coogler is pulling from. For a large chunk of the film, he is kind of teasing us with what it ultimately is, upending expectations with its, by modern studio movie standards, patient pacing and thorny racial politics. But once it does fully unleash itself, we're treated with some of the most deft action and musical sequences and pure genre mayhem that just doesn't come around very often. It's a tried and true event movie that is also about how we find our place in a hostile and confusing world, about how art expresses a personal and collective history. We're very fortunate to have a genuinely smart, gifted filmmaker like Ryan Coogler using major studio money to make films like this. Another year, another new release from prolific auteur Hong Sang-soo, and By the Stream is my favorite film from Hong in years, marking a welcome shift in his style towards something far more reflective and less concerned with temporal playfulness, formal experimentation, and narrative trickery. Of course, all the staples of a Hong Sang-soo film continue to be present here, the copious amounts of smoking, eating, soju drinking, while engaging in cyclical conversations. But most revelatory amongst this is the way he is now carving out the space for these real weighty admissions of love, regret, pain, and longing. His form has been stripped down to the utmost essentials, but strangely, By the Stream does offer more dramatic incident than what has been found in his previous efforts, telling the story of a lecturer at an arts college, played by Kim Min-hee, helping theater students mount a skit after a sexual misconduct scandal forced its previous director to exit. She brings in her uncle, a famous former actor, to then help bring the work to the finish line. Hong offers a steady flow of narrative detail, where in its many repetitions and returns, its very modest construction, ends up bringing forth a moving reflection on the creative process, personal and artistic relationships. There is one scene in particular that continues to stick with me. It's a lengthy, soju-fueled scene in which the director and his group of students open up to one another. He asks these young kids to consider who they are and the kinds of people they want to become, even providing a very honest reflection of his own self and his past regrets. This has become one of my favorite moments across Hong's entire filmography, how he's able to capture such poignant moments with a refreshing lack of artifice on full display. His camera work just functional, his lighting and blocking very rudimentary, and yet his work continues to be a cinematic tonic. Many of his detractors will still find things to bat an eye at, but personally, I will never tire of the annual Hong Sang-soo release. In Miguel Gomez's Grand Tour, past and present collapse in a work entirely untethered to any sense of temporality, and the foolish wonders of discovery take hold. Set in 1918, the film follows Edward, a man who impulsively abandons his fiancée, Molly, and decides to set off on a journey across Southeast Asia. Undeterred by Edward's cowardly display, Molly decides to pursue him, following his expedition across multiple countries, determined to track her fiancé down and reunite once and for all. But Grand Tour is not as simple as it seems, as it develops into a pure experiential voyage that carefully interweaves stylish 16mm black and white photography with contemporary documentary footage, shot some in color, some also in black and white. Images of an epic, unrequited love story merged with archival material from its director's own wandering travels. Gomez uses this present-day, non-fiction footage as a framing device of sorts to then color his colonial-era black and white images, of which are largely shot on sound stages, with an artifice that is formally opposed to the travelogue style Gomez also employs. This careful balance of the real and clearly artificial crafts a film that is as receptive to the world around us as it is the worlds of the big screen. Grand Tour really opens itself up to these many wonders of cinema, the way film can hop across space, time, and form, helping to bring shape to such a sweeping odyssey through not only the people and landscapes of East Asia, but of colonial history and of cinema's relationship to the world at large. It's a film so beautifully keyed into the wonders of discovery and adventure that understands how our world is so alive with possibility at just about every corner. Following the massive success of Uncut Gems, the Safdie brothers decided it best to have a bit of a creative divorce, but both of them have returned to our screens this year, Benny going the route of the more traditional sports biopic with The Smashing Machine, and Josh retaining that propulsive, anxiety-inducing spirit of their previous efforts, with his biggest work to date in Marty Supreme. This is expertly kinetic, high-energy cinema from Josh Safdie that manages to progressively ratchet itself up to certain points you think there's no way it can go any further, yet he somehow continually finds a way to push past that point. Ping Pong has never been rendered more seismic on the silver screen, with Safdie and DP Darius Kanji capturing the sport at such a feverish momentum. The back and forth whip of the paddle as exhilarating to watch as any other more conventionally cinematic sport. Timothée Chalamet is delivering some career best work here as the bold, defiantly individualistic, and yet incredibly charming Marty Mauser. He's so electric to watch at every turn, adding texture to a character that, on the surface, could read as entirely unlikable and self-absorbed. And yet Chalamet somehow has me rooting for him at certain points. The film's episodic structure really allows Safdie to ping-pong between many different modes: the sweat-soaked sports movie, the frenzied crime picture, and an Oedipal 50s romance. Even though it may feel like Marty Supreme is following the Uncut Gems formula pretty closely, Josh throws in enough surprises to differentiate it as a deeply thrilling look at one's relentless pursuit of greatness and reckless delusions of grandeur. As ultimately, Marty Supreme is a film about a man who does not want to be seen as a failure, some other loser wasting his life away working at a shoe store. Marty wants to win and turn his dreams into reality at any cost, and it's so exciting, funny, and devastating to watch. Neo Sora's Happyend is my favorite debut film of the year. Set in a very near-future dystopian Japan, one that doesn't look too dissimilar from what stands today, we trace 5 music-obsessed high school friends on the verge of graduation who are just trying to find their way in the haze of an increasingly fascist government, where mass surveillance and control prohibits them from being able to live their lives the way they want to. Sora uses electronic music as his characters escape from and resistance to this regime and their very limited freedoms. The underground techno clubs, the impromptu DJ sets in a school classroom, or on the streets are spaces where these young characters feel most at peace, allowed to just exist and wholeheartedly be themselves. Happyend is a pretty typical coming-of-age film at times, allowing you to sink into its youthful energy, these kids' conversations and dynamics, which are made even stronger by the fact that the core friend group is largely all played by non-professional actors. But this is also a film about radicalization in the face of authoritarianism. All the same places they hang out and listen to music in are also the same places that they can think about doing something to fix the world they live in, to finally see through their government's lame excuse that what they're imposing upon them is in place to ensure their safety and prosperity. But none of these ideas are over-intellectualized. Sora always keeps everything on an even level with his teen protagonists, to make for a film less about its heady ideas and more about how these social and political underpinnings directly impact these 5 friends, their relationships with one another, and their outlooks for the future. He laces Happyend with equal doses of anxiety, skepticism, and hope, crafting a film that paints a sleek, stylish vision of the future, but one that is also loaded with the very same questions and concerns we're facing today. It's an honest, pure-hearted act of resistance, and a quiet, elegantly shot coming-of-age film. There has not been a more sprawling and playful film about a life lived under an authoritarian regime than Kleber Mendonça Filho's The Secret Agent. Set in a period of great mischief within 1970s Brazil, Filho is taking the grammar of the spy espionage or political thriller and the stylings of the 70s filmmakers he admires like De Palma and Spielberg to make a very dynamic and humanist chronicle of an overlooked moment in Brazil's history. The level of formal playfulness running rampant throughout this 160-minute film is quite simply unmatched, with a variety of whips, zooms, dissolves, split diopter shots, not to mention the amount of narrative detours Filho takes here, from a severed leg found inside a shark's stomach to cats with 2 brains. This is a filmmaker always wanting to keep you on your toes, packing his movie full with pop culture, conspiracy, music, and folklore, alongside this deep interest in community, not just the life of his main character, played exceptionally by Wagner Moura, and maybe the performance of the year. Filho wants these surrounding figures to feel equally as vibrant, alive, and fully realized, meticulously painting an epic canvas of urban life, with its array of colors, symbols, textures, and personalities. This is a whole lot of movie, with many elements that may feel random and cobbled together to some, but that's all intentionally so, as this jumble of influences, this shaggily constructed narrative, and its tricky shifts in time and setting allow you to feel what it's like to piece together a history that would otherwise be erased and lost to time. To think about recollection and reconciliation in a way that educates but isn't didactic, that constructs a past built from a collective memory, in which its filmmaker wants you to not only think about what's on screen, but also what is absent. The gaps in the narrative, the pieces of this story that have slowly eroded and been forgotten over time. This is the history Filho is trying to preserve, while also keeping us entertained with his many digressions and colorful personalities and performances. The Secret Agent is a film that is willfully inviting you to get lost inside of it, and is entirely unafraid of getting lost itself. No one is doing it like director Park. No Other Choice is a deviously funny class thriller and dark comedy, full of Park's usual ingenious formal flourishes. The setup is simple. A factory floor manager for a paper mill is laid off after his company is bought by Americans. Now faced with today's highly competitive job market that dismisses him as disposable, our protagonist, Yu Man-soo, comes to the realization that the only way for him to prosper in this market is to dispose of his competition. This is a gloriously indulgent, highly perceptive work that avoids many of the trappings of the eat the rich class satires that have come before it. No Other Choice avoids the simple catharsis of these many empty-calorie exercises in class consciousness that coast on the upper and lower class antagonisms. Park's film instead probes the middle class perspective, the eat each other mentality to maintain a nice house and a comfortable middle class existence. But beyond that, this material provides the perfect groundwork for Park's absurdist sense of humor, with goofy tonal shifts galore that, in the hands of lesser filmmakers, would give you tonal whiplash, but in his hands work seamlessly moment to moment. Park also remains one of the great visual stylists of the 21st century, devising all kinds of sweeping camera moves, inventive transitions, fades and dissolves, and wickedly great compositions that keep you so engaged. I found myself just as excited to find out where Park was going to place the camera next as I was in seeing how this story was going to unfold. But as flashy and dynamic as the film's style and narrative may be, its message is thoroughly clear and blunt. When met face first with a capitalist society that devalues your abilities and your very existence, You are left with no other choice but to try and knock off your competition, even if you know you'll still be just as replaceable as you were before, forced to sell your soul to the machine so you can provide for your family. No one could have had more fun behind the camera depicting that relentlessly bleak, soul-sucking nature of work in the modern age than Park Chan-wook. The Mastermind is another in a long line of Kelly Reichardt's quaint tales of American drifters, of ordinary working-class individuals living on the margins, just working their way through their poor decision-making and bad impulses within their very solitary existence. She's always stripping back the layers, the expected pacing and plotting of whatever genre she chooses to tinker with, to leave us the most minimal, down-to-earth versions of these particular stories. Reichardt does just that with the crime caper heist movie for The Mastermind. She's deliberately lowered the stakes here, having her quote-unquote big score take place in the first act, freeing the narrative from the usual build-up of a standard heist picture, and instead allowing it to unspool in strange, gloriously uneventful ways. The bumbling art thief at the center of her film, James Blaine Mooney, is played by a blank, melancholic Josh O'Connor, who is right in step with Reichardt's usual deadpan energy, following this man steadily falling through the cracks of his own life. Mooney's not exactly stealing these abstract paintings, plotting heists for any monetary gain, but for a brief escape from his suburban ennui. It's very low-key, patient, and procedural as Reichardt follows Mooney, lost and drifting around these American landscapes, and trying and failing to cover his tracks and talk his way out of his troubles, all in a desperate attempt to spruce up his comfortable but boring existence. He's a pathetic loser, but thanks to O'Connor's innate charm, he's a strangely magnetic loser. You want to keep your eyes on him, just to see what else his self-inflicted stupidity and complete lack of self-awareness befalls him. On the periphery of this drifting tale of the downfall of a wannabe gentleman thief, Reichardt seamlessly inserts many of the thoughts and anxieties sweeping throughout America of the 1970s. The lingering, ever-present forces of war and turmoil, societal pressures to conform to older generations' ideas of success, and the crop of young couples being entirely unequipped for suburban life. Mooney may be running away from his haphazard heist, but he's also trying to escape from those that are entirely inescapable. There are no masterminds in the Mastermind, and there are no thrills within this riff on the crime caper that takes every single opportunity it gets to remove the thrill and action out entirely. It's a Kelly Reichardt movie through and through. Dea Kolumbegashvili's April is a punishingly slow abortion drama that asks you to bear unflinching witness to some truly grueling images. The opening scene alone shows an actual live birth of a stillborn baby, but Dea marries those deeply upsetting, naturalistic scenes with atmospheric, oftentimes surreal sequences. The film is about an obstetrician in rural Georgia who helps her patients requiring abortions despite the legal ramifications for doing so. It's a purposefully cruel, emotionally and formally draining work that astutely observes what the harsh, oppressive forces of religion and patriarchy can do to those, particularly devout working women, who are running in direct opposition to those in control. It's a film of quiet rebellion, where our protagonist's self-imposed isolation also manifests in the filmmaking itself. She hides herself away from any and all human connection, and the camera, with its very taxing long takes and vast empty spaces, are just as emotionally distancing. But the film also switches from these long-take static compositions largely found within the sterile spaces of the hospital to more freeing, handheld camera work that deeper embeds us in her POV. We find this within the crushing naturalism of the at-home abortion sequences, or in the nighttime masochistic sexual escapades. These are the moments when Dea's film takes on a radical shift in movement and form. Not to mention the lo-fi surrealism, akin to something from Jonathan Glazer's Under the Skin, that is best experienced for yourself than described. April is a film that just sucks the life right out of you and leaves you paralyzed by fear. Her first feature, Beginning, was special, but this takes her to new heights, and I cannot wait for whatever is next. It is so difficult to capture in words the staggering beauty of Clint Bentley's train dreams. The film unearths the magnitude and mystery of existence by zeroing in on the life and death of one ordinary man, Robert Grenier, a logger that puts his head down, works hard to provide for his family, and goes home to their loving embrace. Bentley delicately observes his very simple life, every chop of wood, every intimate conversation he listens into, every moment of joy spent with his wife and young daughter, along with every moment of sorrow. Every frame feels like a memory you cling onto out of fear it is going to slip away from you. The memories of people, places, experiences that so quickly and quietly pass through you that it's not until these things are gone that you begin to look back and have a faint understanding of their power and their meaning. Bentley is joining a very small collection of filmmakers that are able to effectively capture the whispers and echoes of nature, the changing faces of landscapes in the world, the ache of time marching on. But at its heart, Bentley's film is about the weight and suffocating nature of grief, not just for the death of those we love, but for one's vision of the world that is slowly and painfully torn away from you. The times will change, axes will move to chainsaws, wooden structures to concrete, people will all begin to move on. And Train Dreams is about recognizing that we're collectively building and repeatedly harming a world meant for our young to inherit. And the lifetime of knowledge we accumulate will all be gone in a breath, or torn down for the sake of progress. All of this, these many multitudes of life, are portrayed with such an unpretentious profundity, largely because of the warm embrace of Will Patton's frequent voiceover narration that provides a clear, emotionally direct manner of storytelling, one that helps prevent the film from treading into overly esoteric or metaphysical territory. As Train Dreams is the kind of movie that wears its heart right on its sleeve, and beautifully so. It's a truly rare, stirring piece of modern American filmmaking. Lynne Ramsay is one of my favorite working filmmakers, and the idea of her working with two powerhouse performers such as Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson had me excited, albeit a little skeptical. Would Ramsay's bleak, sometimes alienating style be pared down? Would the sheer star power it carries take away from its punch? But Die My Love is still Lynne Ramsay doing what Lynne Ramsay does best, delivering such a primal and dizzying work about the horrors of motherhood and marriage, following Lawrence's Grace as she cycles through madness, postpartum depression, and sexual frustrations, all under the roof of a rugged country home. This is very much a continuation of Ramsay's career-long infatuation with deeply troubled individuals, moving seemingly random through scenes or fragments of mania at work. She hurls you towards some of the most punishing, anguished aspects of the human psyche, directly placing you inside the tortured headspace of this character and never once letting up. One such example being Lawrence prowling around her backyard with a knife in her mouth and a hand down her pants. This is handedly career best work from Jennifer Lawrence, who depicts a woman steadily suffocating and coming undone with an empathy and brazenness most performers of her stature just wouldn't go to the length to bring to life. The film centers on a character whose only possible remedy to her torment is through sex and violence, and Ramsay exhaustively strings that through the entire film. Lawrence's facial expressions, feral movement, and nude body in service of that. You can really feel the ferocious energy just blazing off the screen at every moment, almost as if Ramsay, like Grace, had found herself stuck in a rut, not given the proper means to express herself, being she hadn't been able to get a film off the ground since You Were Never Really Here in 2017. But with Die My Love, Ramsay has found that proper canvas, and she violently paints on it. Unsurprisingly, one of the more consensus best movies of the year is Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. I'm not going to be saying anything that hasn't been said already, as it's tough to say much of anything new about a film that has been and continues to be discussed ad nauseum, but One Battle is entirely deserving of such unanimous praise. It's a film that simultaneously feels like nothing PTA has ever done before, and yet everything he's been working towards. It's this perfect blend of the high-energy, mosaic narratives of old PTA and the more measured, open-heartedness of new PTA. With One Battle, he has swept everyone up with a narrative more propulsive than anything he's ever made before it, while still retaining that formal looseness many admire about his work, that ability to move in all sorts of directions freely, and that special feeling his films give you, where you're just ecstatic to experience his bountiful narrative and tonal digressions that converge in such unexpected ways. With One Battle, it's how he's bouncing around from a whirlwind opening montage of sex, violence, and political rebellion to an almost absurdist comedy of escalating hijinks, and capping everything off with a bravura chase sequence for the ages. There's just not a single weak link to be found here. PTA also continues to be one of the great chroniclers of America, and it's so interesting to see him tackle such urgent and timely material in a way that never feels like he's straining to make some kind of a grand statement. Because the hot-button political issues are not the film's central concern. It's instead the story of DiCaprio's Bob, stumbling his way through the mess of America, just trying to be a good dad to his teenage daughter as this confused, hostile world pushes against his stoner, revolutionary ways. The film thrives on this constant interplay, clashing big-budget Hollywood spectacle with moments of intimate stillness, social and political satire colliding with sincerity, formal rigor confronted by chaos and messiness. These are the things that generate One Battle's very singular energy, an energy that I could not get enough of. It's an instant American classic, a movie that is going to be studied and discussed for generations to come, and yet it's somehow PTA's third, maybe fourth best movie. He's one of the greats. It is no small feat to follow up a universally beloved film like The Worst Person in the World, But with Sentimental Value, Joachim Trier has made a film that expands upon and deepens his filmmaking and storytelling in many magnificent ways. This is a deeply touching film about a fractured family discovering their own distinct way to come together and find each other again. About how we have the power to reshape the narrative of our own lives through the artistic process, and maybe use that creative exercise to help heal the wounds of the past. Trier has dialed back the vibrant energy, the vim and verve his previous film possessed, in place of something more somber and minor key. Trier is unglamorously examining an aging, dissatisfied auteur that turns up at the doorstep of the family he once discarded like nothing, wanting to now intrude on their lives, acting like nothing ever happened between them. His two daughters, Nora and Agnes, one furious, the other conflict avoidant, are stuck. Is this sudden reappearance in their lives a genuine desire for reconnection and forgiveness, or is this just Gustav's transactional brand of love manifesting once again? Trier and his writing partner Eskil Vogt have crafted a very complex portrait of family that feels so grounded and true to life, made even more textured by the great ensemble of actors that are so good it's almost as if they're a real family, each of them depicting the weight of all the life these characters have lived before the story had even started. You can feel how they're all reaching out, trying to understand one another's pain in an effort to understand their own. Trier's film so gracefully showcases the ways people shuffle in and out of our lives, as well as the things that go unsaid for years between parents and their children that may or may not ever rise to the surface. But Sentimental Value shows that even simply trying can be enough. Trying to restore certain foundational relationships in your life, and trying to let go of the pains of the past for just a small moment in order to let them back into your life and begin to forgive. There is no blueprint in how to reconnect with those you feel like you've steadily grown away from, but for this family, true harmony begins to present itself through the lens of a camera and the constructed walls of a film set. Isn't that a strange, beautiful thing? Begon's Resurrection is not only my favorite film of the year, it's quickly becoming one of my favorite films of this century. The cinematic magic trick that is Resurrection is nestled within these 5 disparate narratives, all thinly woven together, but as one complete piece, add up to no less than an entire history of image-making itself. The film begins with an ode to the aesthetics of silent cinema from the German Expressionist movement, evoking filmmakers like F.W. Murnau and Fritz Lang, then proceeds to dreamily reinvent itself with each new movement. From a brooding 40s espionage noir into a sort of ghost story set in a snowy, derelict Buddhist temple, a melodrama following a hustler and a young girl he takes under his wing, and finally culminating with a 35-minute single-take sequence that finds 2 strangers traversing dark, seedy alleyways on the eve of the new millennium. This is cinema for the dreamers, a purely sensory, visual, and auditory experience that resists any kind of interpretation, as Begon deeply understands that movies would be nothing without dreaming, and the plethora of illusions they conjure into being. He's tearing down and then reassembling what we thought to be possible with film, delivering a pure demonstration of cinema's power, a reminder of its indispensability, and an evocation of what its destruction could bring forth. It had me leaving the theater, feeling as if I was walking on air. I can't even begin to describe how the filmmaking team pulled this whole thing off. It's a one-of-a-kind cinematic experience, packed to the brim with so many tricks and delights that you could endlessly parse through. Many things that I just don't want to talk about in fear I would ruin its singular allure for those that haven't had the chance to experience it yet. So I'll leave you with this. Resurrection is 2025's single greatest film, and a transcendent work that I'll be thinking about and rewatching for many years to come.